The dim glow of the spaceport's overhead lights flickered as Yarrick stepped off the ramp of his battered freighter, the Starblade. The ship groaned behind him, a testament to years of hard use and patchwork repairs. Yarrick adjusted the strap of his holster, his fingers brushing the worn grip of his plasma pistol. The air was thick with the acrid scent of engine fumes and the faint tang of alien spices, a chaotic blend that mirrored the bustling crowd around him. Traders, mercenaries, and scavengers moved in a steady stream, their voices a cacophony of languages that his translator implant barely kept up with. Jarrek's boots clanged against the metal grating as he made his way toward the market, his mind already calculating how much he could squeeze out of his latest haul. He wasn't a hero. Heroes didn't survive long in the Outer Rim. Yarrick was a pragmatist, a man who'd learned early on that survival often meant bending the rules, or breaking them entirely. His cargo hold was filled with salvage tech from a derelict cruiser, the kind of haul that could fetch a decent price if he found the right buyer. But the right buyer was hard to come by in a place like this. The spaceport of Kesari Prime was a den of opportunists, where trust was as rare as a stable hyperlane. Jarrek's contact, a Zorathian named Vec, was waiting for him in a shadowy corner of the market. Vec's scaled face was unreadable, his slit-pupiled eyes glinting with a cold, calculating light. "Yarrick," Vec hissed, his voice like sandpaper. "You're late." "Traffic," Yarrick replied dryly, leaning against a crate. "You got my payment?" Vec's tongue flicked out, a gesture that might have been amusement or irritation. "Payment is complicated." Jarrek's hand instinctively moved closer to his pistol. "Complicated how?" Vec gestured to a nearby figure, and Jarrek's eyes narrowed as a small, hooded alien was pushed forward. The figure stumbled, their chains clinking softly. "This," Vec said, "is your payment." Yarrick stared at the alien, then back at Vec. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Vec's tone was sharp. "This one is worth more than credits. A rare find. Take it and we're even." Yarrick stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over the hooded figure. The alien was slight, their frame delicate beneath the tattered cloak. Their hands were bound, the chains gleaming faintly under the market's harsh lights. Yarrick reached out, pulling back the hood, and froze. The alien's face was unlike anything he'd seen before. Their skin was a soft, iridescent blue, shimmering faintly as if lit from within. Their eyes, large and luminous, glowed with a golden hue that seemed to pierce straight through him. There was an air of quiet dignity about them, a regal bearing that didn't match their current predicament. They met his gaze without fear, their expression unreadable. "What the hell is this?" Yarrick demanded, turning back to Vec. "A gift," Vec replied smoothly. "Consider it an investment. This one has unique qualities." Jarrek's jaw tightened. He didn't like being played, and this reeked of a setup. But he also knew better than to argue with Vec. The Zorathian had a reputation for being as ruthless as he was cunning. Refusing the deal could mean more trouble than it was worth. "Fine," Yarrick muttered, grabbing the chain. "But if this blows up in my face, I'm coming for you." Vec's laughter followed him as he led the alien back to the Starblade. The walk was tense, the alien moving silently beside him. Yarrick could feel their eyes on him, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. He didn't like it. He didn't like any of this. Once aboard the ship, Yarrick secured the alien in the cargo hold, locking the door behind him. He leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. "All right," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "What the hell am I supposed to do with you?" The alien didn't respond, their gaze fixed on the floor. Yarrick sighed, turning to leave, but a soft voice stopped him in his tracks. "You've made a mistake." Yarrick froze, then slowly turned back. The alien was looking at him now, their golden eyes burning with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "What did you say?" "You've made a mistake," the alien repeated, their voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of warning. "Taking me was unwise." Yarrick crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Yeah? Well, you're not exactly in a position to negotiate." The alien tilted their head, a gesture that was almost amused. "You don't understand. They will come for me. And when they do, you will not survive." Jarek's stomach twisted, but he forced a smirk. Big talk for someone in chains. Before the alien could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Yarek cursed, sprinting to the cockpit. The radar showed 3 ships closing in fast, their signatures unfamiliar but undeniably hostile. He gripped the controls, his mind racing. "What the hell did you get me into?" he muttered, glancing back toward the cargo hold. The alien's words echoed in his mind as he fired up the engines. "They will come for me." Yarek clenched his teeth, steering the Starblade into a narrow escape route. The ships behind him opened fire, their plasma bolts streaking past the viewport. He dodged and weaved, his hands moving instinctively as the ship groaned under the strain. "Hold together, girl," he muttered, pushing the engines to their limit. The alien's warning hung over him like a storm cloud, and for the first time in a long time, Yarek felt the cold grip of fear. He didn't know who or what he'd just taken on, but one thing was clear. This was far from over. As the Starblade broke through the atmosphere and into the cold void of space, Yarek glanced at the radar again. The ships were still there, relentless in their pursuit. He exhaled sharply, his mind already working on a plan. Whatever this alien was, they were trouble, and trouble had a way of finding him no matter how far he ran. The cargo hold was silent now, but Yarek could feel the weight of the alien's presence like a shadow at his back. He didn't know what he'd gotten himself into, but one thing was certain. He was in too deep to turn back now. The Starblade shuddered as another plasma bolt grazed its hull, the impact sending a jarring vibration through the ship. Jarek's hands tightened on the controls, his knuckles white as he maneuvered through the asteroid field. The alien's words echoed in his mind, a haunting refrain that refused to be ignored. "They will come for me." He glanced at the radar, the 3 hostile ships still clinging to his tail like predators scenting blood. "Hold together," he muttered to the ship, though the plea felt as much for himself as for the battered freighter. The Starblade had seen him through countless close calls. But this was different. This wasn't just another run gone wrong. This was something bigger, something he didn't fully understand yet. And that scared him more than he cared to admit. The alien's voice crackled over the ship's intercom, calm and measured despite the chaos. "You cannot outrun them. They are equipped with advanced tracking systems." Jarek's jaw clenched. "Yeah? Got any bright ideas? Or are you just here to state the obvious?" There was a pause. Then the alien replied, "Release me. I can help." Yarek barked a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Nice try. You think I'm stupid enough to fall for that?" "You are already in danger," the alien said, their tone infuriatingly serene. "My assistance increases your chances of survival." Yarek hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't trust the alien, couldn't trust them. But the ships behind him were gaining, their weapons locking onto the Starblade with terrifying precision. He cursed under his breath, then slammed a hand on the intercom. "Fine. But if you try anything, I'll space you myself." He unlocked the cargo hold and strode in, his pistol drawn. The aliens stood calmly, their chains pooled at their feet. Jarek's eyes narrowed. "How'd you get out of those?" The alien ignored the question, stepping forward with an air of quiet authority. "We do not have time for this. The ships will be within firing range in approximately 47 seconds. Yarek gestured toward the cockpit with his pistol. "Move, and don't get any funny ideas." The alien moved swiftly, their movements graceful despite the urgency. Yarek followed close behind, his finger hovering near the trigger. In the cockpit, the aliens slid into the co-pilot's seat, their hands flying over the controls with a familiarity that made Jarek's stomach twist. "What are you?" "Activating secondary thrusters." The alien interrupted, their voice steady. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Before Yarek could protest, the ship lurched forward, the sudden acceleration pressing him into his seat. The alien's hands moved with precision, their glowing eyes fixed on the viewport as they navigated the asteroid field with an ease that bordered on unnatural. The pursuing ships faltered, their trajectories thrown off by the sudden shift. Yarrick stared, his grip on the pistol slackening. "Who the hell are you?" The alien didn't look at him, their focus unwavering. "My name is Lyra. I am the heir to the Celestian Dominion." Yarrick's blood ran cold. The Celestian Dominion, one of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, known for their advanced technology and ruthless efficiency. And he'd just taken their heir as a slave. "You've got to be kidding me." Lyra's gaze flicked to him, her golden eyes piercing. "I assure you I am not." Yarrick sank into the pilot's seat, his mind reeling. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "I did not know if I could trust you," Lyra replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "But it seems we are now bound by necessity." Yarrick let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, necessity. That's one word for it." The ship shuddered again, a warning light flashing on the console. Lyra's hands moved swiftly, rerouting power to the shields. "We cannot sustain this for long. We need to lose them." Yarrick rubbed a hand over his face, his mind racing. "There's an old mining outpost nearby, abandoned. We can lay low there, maybe throw them off our trail." Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "Lead the way." The Starblade veered sharply, the asteroid field giving way to the dark expanse of space. Yarrick set a course for the outpost, his hands steady on the controls despite the turmoil in his mind. He glanced at Lyra, her iridescent skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. "Why were you sold as a slave? If you're who you say you are, why didn't your people come for you?" Lyra's gaze darkened, a flicker of emotion breaking through her calm facade. "I was betrayed. Someone within my own court orchestrated my capture. They wanted to destabilize the Dominion, to weaken us from within." Yarrick whistled low. "Politics. Always a mess." "Indeed," Lyra said softly. "But now you are involved, whether you wish to be or not." Yarrick's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." The outpost came into view, a hulking structure of rusted metal and broken machinery. Yarrick guided the Starblade into a docking bay, the ship groaning as it settled onto the landing pad. He powered down the engines, the silence that followed almost deafening. Lyra stood, her movements graceful as she turned to face him. "Thank you for trusting me." Yarrick snorted, holstering his pistol. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of the woods." Lyra inclined her head, a gesture that felt oddly regal. "Nevertheless, I am grateful." Yarrick hesitated, then gestured toward the exit. "Come on. Let's see if this place has anything useful." They moved through the outpost, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. Yarrick kept his hand near his pistol, his senses on high alert. Lyra walked beside him, her presence both comforting and unnerving. She seemed out of place in the derelict surroundings, her ethereal beauty a stark contrast to the grime and decay. As they reached the control room, Lyra's eyes lit up. This could work. Yarrick raised an eyebrow. What could work? Lyra moved to the console, her hands flying over the controls. "I can use the outpost's communication array to send a distress signal. If my people receive it, they will come for us." Yarrick crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "And if the wrong people pick it up?" Lyra's gaze met his, her expression resolute. "It is a risk we must take." Yarrick exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. Do it." As Lyra worked, Yarrick's mind raced. He'd always been a loner, someone who looked out for himself and no one else. But now he was tied to something bigger, something he didn't fully understand. And Lyra, she was more than just a passenger. She was a key to a conflict that could reshape the galaxy. The console beeped, pulling him from his thoughts. Lyra straightened, her expression grim. "The signal has been sent. Now we wait." Yarrick nodded, his gaze drifting to the viewport. The stars outside seemed colder, more distant than before. He didn't know what was coming, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same. Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "Whatever happens, know that I will not forget what you have done for me." Yarrick glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, well, let's hope we both live long enough for that to matter." The outpost creaked around them, the sound a reminder of the precariousness of their situation. But for the first time since this mess began, Yarrick felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. The silence in the outpost was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of metal and the faint hum of the communication array. Yarrick paced the control room, his boots echoing against the rusted floor. Lyra stood by the console, her luminous eyes fixed on the readouts, her expression unreadable. The tension between them was palpable, a heavy weight that neither seemed willing to address. "How long until someone picks up the signal?" Yarrick asked, his voice cutting through the stillness. Lyra didn't look up. "It depends on how far the nearest Dominion vessel is. Could be minutes, could be hours." Yarrick stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair. "And if it's the wrong people?" Lyra's gaze flicked to him, her golden eyes piercing. "Then we fight." Yarrick snorted, though there was no humor in it. "Fight? With what? This place is falling apart, and we've got one ship that's barely holding together." Lyra straightened, her posture regal despite the grim surroundings. "We have each other, and that will have to be enough." Yarrick opened his mouth to retort, but the console beeped, cutting him off. Lyra turned back to the controls, her hands moving swiftly. "A ship is approaching. Dominion." Yarrick's heart skipped a beat. "You sure?" Lyra nodded, her expression tightening. "Yes, but something is wrong." Before Yarrick could ask what she meant, the outpost's proximity alarm blared, the sound harsh and grating. He cursed, sprinting to the viewport. A sleek, silver ship was descending toward the outpost, its design unmistakably Dominion. But instead of landing, it hovered ominously, its weapons trained on the structure. "They're not here to rescue us," Yarrick said, his voice low. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. "It's them. The traitors." Yarrick turned to her, his mind racing. "What do they want?" "Me," Lyra replied, her tone grim. "Dead or alive, it doesn't matter. As long as I don't return to the Dominion." Yarrick's jaw tightened. "Well, that's not happening." Lyra's gaze softened, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you." Yarrick shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." The ship outside fired, a plasma bolt slamming into the outpost shields. The structure shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. Yarrick grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the door. "We need to move. Now." They ran through the outpost, the sound of the ship's weapons echoing behind them. Yarrick's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. The Starblade was their only way out, but it was docked on the other side of the outpost. They'd have to cross the entire structure to reach it. As they rounded a corner, a group of armed figures appeared, their weapons raised. Yarrick cursed, shoving Lyra behind him as he drew his pistol. "Stay back." The figures opened fire, their plasma bolts lighting up the corridor. Yarrick returned fire, his shots precise despite the chaos. Lyra crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the area. "There's a maintenance shaft ahead. We can use it to bypass them." Yarrick nodded, firing a few more shots to keep the attackers at bay. "Go. I'll cover you." Lyra hesitated, her gaze locking with his. "Be careful." Yarrick smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Always am." Lyra darted toward the shaft, her movements swift and silent. Yarrick followed, his heart pounding as he squeezed into the narrow space. The shaft was dark and cramped, the air thick with the scent of oil and rust. They moved quickly, the sound of their pursuers fading behind them. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged near the docking bay. The Starblade was still there, though the ship's hull was scorched from the earlier attack. Yarrick sprinted toward it, Lyra close behind. They boarded the ship, Yarrick slamming his hand on the controls to close the ramp. "Get us out of here," Lyra said, her voice urgent. Yarrick didn't need to be told twice. He slid into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, the ship lifting off the landing pad just as the Dominion vessel fired again. The Starblade shuddered, but Yarrick held the course, steering them out of the outpost and into open space. The Dominion ship pursued, its weapons locking onto them. Jarek's hands tightened on the controls, his mind racing. We can't outrun them. Lyra moved to the co-pilot seat, her hands moving over the console. I can reroute power to the engines, but it will weaken the shields. Jarek nodded. Do it. The ship surged forward, the increased speed putting distance between them and their pursuers. But the Dominion ship was fast, its weapons relentless. A plasma bolt struck the Starblade, the impact sending a jolt through the ship. Shields are down to 20%, Lyra warned. Jarek cursed, his mind racing. We need a plan. Fast. Lyra's gaze flicked to him, her expression resolute. There's a nearby nebula. If we can reach it, the interference will mask our signature. Jarek's eyes narrowed. And if we get lost in there? Lyra met his gaze, her golden eyes burning with determination. It's a risk we have to take. Jarek exhaled sharply, then nodded. All right, let's do it. He adjusted the course, steering the Starblade toward the nebula. The swirling clouds of gas and dust grew larger on the viewport, their colors shifting and blending in a mesmerizing display. The Dominion ship fired again, but the bolts were absorbed by the nebula's interference. As they entered the nebula, the sensors went haywire, the readings chaotic and unreliable. Jarek's hands tightened on the controls, his focus unwavering. This is going to be rough. Lyra didn't respond, her attention fixed on the console. The ship shuddered as it navigated through the dense clouds, the turbulence making it difficult to maintain control. But Jarek held the course, his instincts guiding him through the chaos. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged on the other side, the Dominion ship nowhere in sight. Jarek let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, his hands trembling slightly on the controls. We did it, Lyra said softly, her voice filled with relief. Jarek leaned back in his seat, running a hand over his face. Yeah, for now. Lyra turned to him, her expression softening. Thank you, Jarek, for everything. Jarek met her gaze, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Don't mention it. Really. Lyra's lips curved into a small smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. You're a good man, Jarek, despite what you may think. Jarek looked away, his chest tightening. Yeah, well, don't let it get around. The Starblade drifted through the stars, the nebula fading behind them. Jarek didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose. He'd started this journey as a reluctant participant, but now he was invested. And whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to back down. Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. We'll find a way to clear my name. And when we do, you'll have the gratitude of the Celestian Dominion. Jarek glanced at her, a smirk playing on his lips. Yeah, well, let's hope it's worth it. The stars stretched out before them, endless and uncharted. Jarek didn't know what the future held, but for now he was content to keep flying. After all, in a galaxy as vast and unpredictable as this, sometimes that was all you could do.